Ever stepped into Grandma's pantry and wondered, what on earth is all this stuff? From towering jars of lard that seemed to last forever to her famous homemade raspberry jam, these were the absolute essentials that every single home had back then. Let's open the pantry door. Starting off strong with lard, a long-lasting fat. Oh, lard, the oft-maligned and misunderstood fat that is returning to kitchens where flavor matters. It turns out Grandma did know something we didn't. Lard is a wonder ingredient in the kitchen. In the good old days, before olive oil became trendy and people started eating avocado toast, everyone used little more than lard to make everything from flaky pie crusts to crispy fried chicken. It was so versatile, not to mention that it needed no refrigeration. Unlike butter, need to saute veggies? Use lard. Making biscuits? Lard. Grease a pan? Yep, lard again. Surprisingly, lard from pasture-raised pigs is actually pretty healthy. If kept in a cool, dark spot, lard could last for months, always on hand to add a bit of extra flavor, or a little grease whenever you needed it. Plus, it was super simple to make after a Sunday roast. Just render the fat, pour it into jars, and you had cooking gold ready to go. So, if you ever find yourself craving a little taste of the good old days, grab some lard and embrace your inner granny. Just be careful who you tell. Drop that tidbit at your local Whole Foods, and you might leave a few health nuts speechless. Grandma's pantry just wouldn't have been complete without those rows of vibrant jars packed with homemade fruit preserves. They weren't there just for decoration. These jars were the key to enjoying summer's sweetness long after the last fruit had fallen from the trees. Peaches, strawberries, raspberries. If it grew, Grandma probably preserved it, and for good reason. Back then, you didn't just stroll to the store in the dead of winter for fresh fruit. Nope, you made do with what was in the pantry. And if Grandma's preserves were on the shelf, you were in for a real treat. You could spread it on toast, bake it into pies, or drizzle it over some homemade ice cream. One of the coolest things about preserves is how long they last. When sealed properly, they can last for years. They're like little time capsules of summer, ready to be opened when February's gray days have you longing for a taste of July. No need for refrigeration, just a spot on the pantry shelf until you're ready to dive in. So the next time you're craving some nostalgia, grab a jar of preserves and let Grandma's sweet touch transport you back to those sun-soaked, simpler days. Dried beans may sound unattractive, but don't let its unassuming appearance fool you. They are the kings of the pantry. These little guys are the unsung heroes of Grandma's kitchen. And there's always a sack or two hidden somewhere in the back of the pantry. Cheap, nutritious, and can last for many years. Dried beans are truly a miracle food. In fact, in difficult times, they often form the backbone of many meals. You can't go wrong with a hearty bean soup or stew. When you want to feed a crowd without breaking the bank, let's face it, Grandma knows how to stretch out a meal. She can turn a pound of beans into a week's worth of dinners, and each nut tastes better than the last. Of course, there is also soak them at night all over it. That sounds tricky in today's fast-paced, microwave-ready world. But in Grandma's time, that was just part of life. You soak the beans and wait. And when they're ready, they're cooked slowly over low heat until they melt deliciously in your mouth. Dry beans also come in all shapes and sizes, such as kidney beans, pinto beans, black beans, etc. Grandma's pantry is basically a bean buffet. It has space for all kinds of soups, stews, and salads. So next time you're walking down the bean aisle, give a nod to these pantry powerhouses. Homemade pickles. No self-respecting grandma would let a crop of cucumbers go to waste. Enter homemade pickles. Pickles aren't just a way to add zing to a sandwich. They are a way to maintain all of the garden's hard work. When the cucumbers roll up too fast for you to eat, you pickle them, and it's so easy. But pickles aren't just limited to cucumbers, carrots, onions. Even nuts can be salted. Ready to be a delicious and crunchy side dish in almost any meal. Pickles have a fun history too. It dates back thousands of years to ancient Mesopotamia. But in Grandma's time, it was all about jars and secret salt recipes passed down from generation to generation. Some pickles are sweet, Some types have a sour taste, and some packed a punch that would bring tears to your eyes. It is a science and an art, and Grandma has perfected the pickling process. The best part? Pickles will last forever. Okay? Maybe not forever, but it's close enough. If stored properly, it can be stored for months or even years, ready to add deliciousness to any meal. Salted pork, also known as the original meat preservation recipe, is the true most valuable player of Grandma's kitchen. Before anyone stares in the refrigerator, people rely on salt to maintain the freshness of their meat, or at least keep it edible. Imagine a time when all that stood between you and rotting meat was a hearty layer of salt. Grandma knew this secret well. She took a good piece of pork and mixed it with salt, and voila! Salted pork was born. The exciting thing about this method is that the salt draws out moisture. This makes bacteria almost unable to grow. It's like having a tiny bouncer at your meat party, ensuring that no unwanted germs spoil the celebration. Salted pork could be thrown into a pot of beans, added to a hearty stew, or simply fried up for breakfast. The options are endless, and Grandma knew them all. In addition, salted pork is a staple food during difficult times. It supported the family when fresh meat was in short supply. As an added bonus, it's versatile and will last for months. Perfect for the long winter months or if you're traveling around the country. Although modern health trends warn against excessive sodium intake, in your grandmother's time, a pinch of salt was the only way to survive. So next time you're eating bacon or ham, think of your grandmother's salted pork heirloom. It is not just a relic from the past, but a delicious reminder of how creativity can lead to delicious solutions. Sourdough starter is a magical concoction that turns easy ingredients into fluffy, delicious bread. It was a staple in Grandma's pantry long before gluten unfastened was even a factor. This ancient tradition goes back hundreds of years, proving that while the era has advanced, our love for an awesome loaf of bread hasn't changed a chunk. The best part? That sourdough starter can live forever. With a bit of care, it can outlive Grandma herself. Just consider it. A little jar of gooey goodness bubbling away, equipped to convert any dough right into a crusty masterpiece. Sourdough is a real multitasker in the kitchen. You could make the whole lot from classic loaves to pancakes, waffles, or even pizza crust with that starter. And don't even get me started on the flavor. It has a unique tanginess that normal bread just can't compete with. Plus, some say that the wild yeast found in sourdough can be easier on your digestive system. It's like a pleasant little bacteria party to your gut. But be cautious. If you forget about your starter, it will develop into a science experiment gone wrong. No one wants to create a brand new breed of kitchen mold. So, next time you tear right into a warm slice of sourdough, don't forget Grandma's old jar of starter, bubbling away like a wizard's potion, bringing comfort and pleasure with every bite. Canned vegetables were the silent workers of Granny's kitchen. Those beautiful inventions offered the hint of a summer in Granny's pantry, although it was buried in snow. Think for a moment that you entered her kitchen and saw those shiny jars standing as soldiers, always giving you the taste of comfort in your mouth. Canning the vegetables wasn't just about preserving the harvest. It was, to a certain extent, a survival technique in a world where a grocery store was not a day's ride away. For the green beans or the tomatoes, for instance, Grandma would always ensure that she picked the freshest from her farm and prepared them in the most appropriate way. If they are your favorite vegetables or fruits, it's like preserving them in time. If you close the lid well, you are going to be eating the produce of the summer, even in winter. Did you know that the art of canning dates back to the early 19th century? It was developed as a means through which people could acquire food during wartime. Boy, that operation was something like a military strategy. And now, we can enjoy that same convenience in our homes. Canned veggies are perfect for making soups, casseroles, and even as a side dish. No cooking required. Simply heat the meal and you're set to start your delicious eating spree. Homemade vinegar was the magical elixir lurking in Grandma's pantry, the secret ingredient for everything, from tangy pickles to household cleaning. For most people, vinegar is a simple ingredient that is placed on the table as a condiment. This fermented concoction was the functional kitchen multi-tool that could and would do it all. Making vinegar at home is kind of an experiment. Taking some kind of fruit juice, say apple or grape, adding sugar into it and letting Mother Nature do the rest of her magic. Grandma would use it in her pickling adventures, ensuring those cucumbers were brined to perfection, ready to become a crunchy side dish. Why spend your hard-earned money on store-bought when you have fresh homemade food in a jar? But vinegar wasn't just for the kitchen. Oh no! Grandma would use it to clean surfaces, remove stains, and even freshen the laundry. Just imagine the confusion when people realized that the sour-smelling liquid could also work wonders around the house. Besides, homemade vinegar is organically better than its commercial counterparts, packed with probiotics and beneficial bacteria. So, next time you reach for a bottle of vinegar, remember that Grandma wasn't just a kitchen magician. She was a pioneer of practical living, turning something as simple as fermented fruit juice into a pantry staple that helped her cook, clean, and preserve all in one fell swoop. Molasses is not the first thing that comes to mind when people think of sweeteners. But if you opened Grandma's pantry door, you'd see this thick and gooey liquid ready to enhance the taste of everything she baked. Cane sugar has to take back its seat because molasses adds a unique flavor to almost any dish. It doesn't look like much or anything special, yet it contains numerous nutrients and adds a burst of flavor. Getting its source from sugarcane or sugar beets, molasses can be compared to the sweetener's grandmaster, the sweetness of which can be mediocre to robust. Well, did you know that molasses is derived in the process of sugar manufacturing? It's like the bonus prize that no one knew they needed. Now for some more interesting facts about molasses. It is packed with nutrients, rich in vitamins and minerals such as iron, calcium, and potassium, among others. This sticky sweetener is perhaps one of the most versatile you will come across. You can use it in cookies, marinades, barbecue sauces, and even as a sweetener for baked beans. Stored properly, molasses can last for years, just like those hidden Christmas cookies from last year's batch. Hardtack, the last biscuit standing. Let's be honest, hardtack isn't anyone's idea of comfort food, but don't underestimate this resilient little biscuit. It's the culinary Swiss Army knife. Made to last, hardtack has been an emergency food staple for centuries, and if you peeked into Grandma's pantry, you might still find a few of these unbreakable snacks lurking. Designed for sailors, soldiers, and anyone needing long-lasting nourishment, hardtack keeps it simple with just flour, water, and salt. It may sound basic, but that's the secret to its survival power. It can last for years. In fact, some hardtack has even been pulled from shipwrecks, still rock hard and technically edible. Now that is longevity. Though not exactly soft or flavorful, hardtack has been a literal lifesaver. It's tough enough to be gnawed on as is, softened in coffee, or crumbled into soup. Just don't expect a gourmet experience. It's about as exciting as chewing on a brick. But for Grandma, this was essential, a way to get carbs when nothing fresh was around. So, while today's diets lean towards fresh and flavorful, there's something endearing about a food that stood the test of time. Cornmeal is one of those ingredients that works in the background, which is worthy without receiving much attention. But Grandma was aware of its value. From this fine and sometimes coarsely ground corn product, she could prepare everything, from cornbread to the thick polenta. If there was one thing that Grandma knew how to do, it was to turn a single ingredient into some kind of masterpiece. Enough has already been said about the fact that cornmeal has a rich history in America and is especially typical for Southern dishes. It is the basis for comforting me's and Grandma's cornbread recipe that could make even the cold heart melt in joy. With nothing more than cornmeal, water, and some eggs, you would get a warm golden loaf ready for buttering. Yet cornmeal is not just an enabler of cornbread, if I may say so. It can be used in thickening soups, or it can be used to coat fish before frying, or even to make polenta, which can be served creamy or allowed to set and be sliced. It certainly gives a feeling that this pantry staple is the Danny DeVito of the kitchen, always willing and able to take on new roles. Oatmeal remains to be the uncontested breakfast winner when it comes to the Grandma's Pantry breakfast rating of the most filling for breakfast until lunch. When it comes to healthy breakfast choices, oatmeal is definitely a win-win, providing a filling and warm experience. Forget the novelty of breakfast bowls. Grandma knew a steaming bowl of oats could power you up for any endeavor, whether it was a hard day at the office or an all-out snowball fight in the backyard. Loaded with fiber and important nutrients that the body requires, oatmeal has the marvelous effect of making anyone full longer than a bowl of cereal sweetened with sugar. You can dress it up with fruits, nuts, honey, or even a splash of maple syrup. Feeling adventurous? Add a spoonful of peanut butter and some chocolate chips, and you've turned breakfast into a treat that feels like dessert. What's even better? Oatmeal is a long-term product, and that is why it is an ideal product for a pantry, for emergencies, and for lazy Sundays. Historically, oatmeal has been around for thousands of years, but Grandma had her own secret: the perfect cooking time. Again, this is about getting that balance to the texture that makes it neither creamy nor chewy. The next time you are searching for a healthy breakfast meal, grab that bag of oats. Bacon grease was the liquid gold in Grandma's kitchen. It was kept in a jar on the side of the stove where the warmth was perfect for using it in any dish. Sorry, exotic oils. Bacon fat was the first taste-enhancing potion, which gave extra depth and that scrumptious, slightly charred essence to any dish. Besides, the flavorful fats that are otherwise just drained off could help prepare delicious fried eggs, cornbread, and even vegetables. Another of Grandma's traditional staples, bacon grease was also the go-to for all frying needs instead of butter or oil. It yields high heat, which is useful when frying potatoes, or when frying other green vegetables to make them crisp. It is not just delicious. As you all know, this method is all about saving money. During the Great Depression, bacon grease was valuable. It was an ideal way to economize and make dishes all the more delicious. With its incredible versatility and rich flavor, bacon grease was Grandma's go-to ingredient for making every dish shine. It was a symbol of her resourcefulness and her ability to turn the simplest ingredients into something delicious. Root vegetables were Grandma's winter survival kit, lining her pantry shelves and tucked away in dark corners like hidden treasures. Potatoes, onions, and turnips, the long-lasting root crops with strong flavors, were the best for any stockpile. All these veggies require is a cool, dark corner and can sit for months until it's time to chop them up for winter soups, stews, and roasts. I believe that potatoes are the most versatile food items that you can find in your pantry. No matter if they are mashed, baked, or fried, they create warmth in any meal. Onions, the humble workhorse of the kitchen, add flavor to almost every dish imaginable, from savory casseroles to hearty soups. Potatoes may be the darling of the root vegetables, but turnips are just as tasty and very charming when served in a stew. However, it's not just about taste. These root veggies are also full of nutrients. Potatoes contain potassium and vitamin C, onions have antioxidant properties, and turnips provide fiber as well as folate. Root vegetables could be stored for months without spoiling, making them perfect for long winters when fresh produce was scarce. Dried herbs were Grandma's secret of how to make every meal delicious as if it was picked straight from the garden, regardless of the seasons. In the days before there were dozens of choices in the spice aisle, Grandma dried her own herbs, tying up bundles of rosemary, thyme, and basil in a warm, dry place until they were as dry as crisp. With the little jars of green and brown flakes, it was possible to transform the winter kitchen and make it smell like summer gardens. Drying herbs was an art and a requirement of daily life. On the other hand, fresh herbs have a limited shelf life, while dried herbs can last for as long a time as several months or even years. When grocery shopping was a luxury that happened once a week, keeping dried herbs on hand allowed Grandma to make every soup, roast, or stew taste delicious without headache. Plus, dried herbs often have a more concentrated flavor than fresh ones, so a pinch was often all she needed to bring a dish to life. Did you know that certain herbs like rosemary and thyme contain natural oils that help preserve their flavor even as they dry? It's a bit of nature's own preservation magic. And it's not just about taste. Many dried herbs are packed with antioxidants and have been used in folk medicine for centuries. Those little jars weren't just decorative. They were Grandma's toolkit, turning simple ingredients into meals that were anything but plain. Before condensed milk, evaporated milk was dubbed as emergency milk. a must-have in all kitchens in the 20th century for whipping up creamy, rich dishes when fresh milk wasn't on hand. It's made by slowly heating milk to remove about 60% of its water content, leaving behind a thick, concentrated dairy product with a long shelf life. This made it invaluable for baking and cooking, whether it be holiday pumpkin pie or a cheesy, creamy casserole. In my opinion, evaporated milk is special because this ingredient gives some extra creamy richness that normal milk cannot provide. It provides richness without the fattening guilt of heavy cream, which is why Grandma used it in everything from mashed potatoes to macaroni cheese. And if she had to add milk to her coffee or when preparing something, she could simply add some water and the powder turned into normal milk. This ingredient was not only a kitchen tool, it became a money-saving method as well. During situations when fresh dairy was scarce or expensive, evaporated milk became a perfect solution. And the best part? The product has a very long shelf life of about a year and hence can be stocked in large quantities. It is no wonder that it was a frequently used item in Grandma's pantry, right? Delicious dried apples, sweet as candies and reminiscent of childhood. In the past, people used to eat fresh apples, especially during the harvest season, but they also used to slice the apples, dry them, and consume them all through the year. Dried apples are the kind of snack that gets that sweet, savory combination just right, and the natural sugars serve as a good boost when the afternoon lulls drag on. Drying apples was the ultimate way to preserve a fall harvest. After all, apple trees tend to produce far more fruit than anyone can eat fresh, and in times before refrigeration, drying was the next best option. When the water is replaced with sugar and left to dry out, the apples will not spoil for months, ideal for baking during the colder months or as a sweet accompaniment for savory dishes. Also, they contain a lot of fiber and vitamin C, making them a pantry staple. If you're looking to channel your inner grandma, try drying your own apples. Just slice, sprinkle a bit of cinnamon, and bake at a low temp until they're perfectly chewy. You'll have a jar of snacks that'll taste like fall all year long. While sauerkraut might seem like a dish only an old country soul might love, it was simply one of the staples in Grandma's pantry. Sauerkraut is one of the most famous traditional meals that are not only tangy and crunchy, but also contain great amounts of probiotics. The basic combination of fermented cabbage may not make it look like the ultimate dish, but it is genuinely a hero in disguise. The process of making sauerkraut from the cabbage was one of the smartest practices to preserve vegetables throughout the year. The process is simple. Add salt, let it sit, and let natural bacteria do their thing. That's right. It's a raw, wild fermentation process that requires nothing more than a bit of patience. Through time, cabbage becomes sauerkraut with a sour and rich taste, which made food more special. Sauerkraut's origins trace back thousands of years, with variations across cultures, from German to Korean kimchi. Grandma's sauerkraut was likely a family recipe, passed down from her own grandma. Some might say Grandma's sauerkraut was her secret weapon for staying healthy all year round. Today, crackers might not be perceived as anything more than a commonplace mouth-watering delicacy. However, they were considerably closer to a food group in Grandma's pantry. Graham and soda crackers were basic, available in the kitchen for munching, accompanying cheese, or to be served with soup. These crackers were hard, dense, and dry, just what people needed for their cracker stash so it wouldn't go rancid. And let's be honest with ourselves, there is nothing as comforting as a simple cracker. It is the go-to for many things, from jam to cheese to a simple peanut butter scooped on it. Soda crackers, which were also referred to as saltines, were a sought-after remedy for a queasy tummy. There's nothing like a saltine to calm nervous bowels. At the same time, graham crackers had their past, which began in the 19th century when Reverend Sylvester Graham made them to fight off cravings. These crackers became rather universal objects in the kitchen. They might be mashed for pie crusts, boiled in soups, or eaten only with a little butter. And yes, they may not be all that glamorous, but I have always found that crackers have the unique power to transform the most basic food into something much more satisfying and adventurous. A common dish so dear to many, homemade pasta. There's something special about making pasta by hand. rolling out dough and cutting it into long noodles or tiny shapes that can stand the test of time. Unlike fresh pasta, which has a shorter shelf life, dried homemade pasta could last for months, sitting in jars or tins, just waiting to be turned into a delicious meal. Preparing pasta was a family endeavor carried out by Grandma in her kitchen. She'd whip up a little more flour and more eggs to create and knead the dough, roll it out as thin or as thick as possible, and slice them into fettuccine, spaghetti, or even into cubes for soups they even squeezed. For homemade pasta, the texture is different than in store-bought, and that makes it very enjoyable. By making pasta and drying it, Grandma could have a homemade meal ready to go whenever she needed it. The process of drying homemade pasta is what gives it a long shelf life, making it a staple for any pantry. Pemmican was something like a protein bar, or rather something much better. This highly concentrated food was prepared from dried meat and fat, and sometimes dried berries to keep Grandma's energy levels high and her tummy filled. It is the world's ideal survival food, which can stay for months if not for years before going bad. Pemmican is a concentrated mixture of certain Native American foods that were developed centuries ago and is used as energy-providing foods on journeys or hunting expeditions. This concoction of protein, fat, and carbohydrates was an energy bomb that contained all the essential nutrients required to push through when fresh produce was not available. And while it might not look pretty, pemmican's richness and flavor make it surprisingly satisfying, especially in tough times. The fat preserved the meat and kept it from drying out, while the berries added a slight sweetness and even a few vitamins. Pemmican was so durable that it found its way into the pantries of adventurers, soldiers, and anyone with a plan to be away from home for a while. This stuff could handle any climate and was easy to pack. Today, you may not even see pemmican in every grocery store, but it's still popular among survivalists and hikers who value its energy-boosting properties. Sugarloaf is the original form of sugar, back when granulated sugar wasn't still a thing. This hard, cone-shaped piece of unrefined sugar was a staple in Grandma's pantry. It is used to sweeten everything from tea to baked goods. To get a bit of sweetness from it, Grandma would break off a piece using a hammer or a sugar nipper. Sugar wasn't always as easy as a spoonful. Cane sugar is made into dense lumps which can be stored indefinitely. Sugarloaf was made by refining cane sugar into a dense, solid form that could be stored indefinitely, much longer than the bags of sugar we're used to today. Sugar was also viewed as a sort of medicine back in the day, and Grandma used it sparingly. But when it came time for a special dessert or a holiday meal, she'd chip off a chunk and make something memorable, whether that was a cake, a batch of cookies, or even a few candied fruits. Sugarloaf eventually disappeared from the kitchen as granulated sugar became easier to manufacture and store. But if you ever want to see one for yourself, you can still find them in some specialty stores. Who knows, it might make you appreciate that spoonful of sugar just a little bit more. Homemade jams are the pantry superstar, the way Grandma kept the taste of summer going all year long. Strawberries, blueberries, peaches. If it grew in the garden, it likely ended up in a jam jar. This not only helps preserve the fruit, but it's also a dessert that can be turned into bread, biscuits, cake, or something special. The jam-making process, known as canning, involves heating fruit and sugar, and then sealing it in jars to prevent spoilage. This method gave jam its long shelf life without refrigeration, meaning it could be enjoyed well into winter when fresh fruit was nowhere to be found. Grandma didn't have a grocery store full of fruit year-round, so this was her way of keeping things fruity no matter the season. Plus, homemade jam has a flavor that's hard to beat with store-bought options, full of real fruit flavor, minus the additives you find in store versions. Today, making your own jam is a fun way to bring some kitchen wisdom into your home. And there's nothing better than the feeling of opening a jar and spreading bright, fruity jam on warm bread. Dried peas were Grandma's go-to for hearty, filling meals. Cheap, nutritious, and long-lasting dried peas were perfect for thickening up soups and stews and stretching out meals when ingredients were limited. Split pea soup, anyone? Dried beans, one of the oldest cultivated crops, have been around since ancient times. They are like little powerhouses, packed with protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. They are a valuable addition to any pantry. Dried beans stored in a cool, dry place can last for years without spoiling. To cook dried beans, Grandma would soak the beans overnight, then add them to a soup or cook into a thick, comforting porridge. This makes them ideal for winter meals. And the best part? Dried beans are incredibly filling and inexpensive. This makes them a great budget-friendly food option. Dried peas may seem like an old-fashioned ingredient, but they're still as nutritious and versatile as ever. So if you're craving a taste of the past, try a batch of split pea soup, and you'll be giving Grandma's pantry wisdom the respect it deserves. Powdered eggs were Grandma's answer to fresh eggs when there were shortages or long winters. Made by dehydrating eggs into a powder, these shelf-stable eggs were a staple for baking, quick meals, and emergencies. No fridge needed, just a spoonful of powder mixed with water, and voila, you had eggs. During wartime rationing, powdered eggs were common in households as a substitute for fresh eggs. They have a long shelf life and can be stored at room temperature, making them ideal for pantries. And while they might not be as fluffy as the real deal when scrambled, they work wonders in baking, helping cookies, cakes, and breads rise perfectly. Interestingly, powdered eggs are still used today in food manufacturing and by campers and hikers who need a reliable protein source without carrying fresh eggs. For Grandma, powdered eggs were a backup plan, ensuring she could bake birthday cakes or weekend pancakes even if fresh eggs weren't available. While they might not replace fresh eggs at every breakfast, they're a great reminder of how resourceful Grandma was with her pantry staples. Summit bars were all about layers upon layers of deliciousness. I mean, just imagine crispy wafers and a generous helping of peanuts all smothered in a rich chocolate coating, straight out of our dreams. These bars were labeled as cookie bars on the packaging, but candy bars in some advertising. It was pretty much a Snickers bar's cooler, older cousin. Yeah, it was a more grown-up version of the classic candy bar, with a slightly subtler sweetness that appealed to a wider range of taste buds. Now, it didn't have the marketing pizzazz as some of its competitors, but the Summit bar's taste spoke for itself. They tried to keep it from becoming a historical artifact. In 1983, Mars upgraded the bar to individual foil wrapping and promoted the bar as having 30% more chocolate. The new bar was longer and thinner, but wasn't as good as the original and received mediocre reviews. The Summit bar was going down and nothing could save it. Today, it's simply a fragment of our memories. Nabisco came out with the most adorable cookies when they put Giggle Cookies out on shelves everywhere for the public to enjoy. Now, usually, just having a smiley face-based snack is not enough to clear shelves out during grocery shopping trips, but when the snack was a sandwich cookie with many different fillings, each as rich as the last one, that goal starts to look a little more realistic. Kids would often eat them and collect the stickers that came with the packages, putting them on their toys and cars and whatnot. Some people do claim that they found the smiley design a bit unsettling, but all that would usually go away when they would taste the snack. Guess you can call that love at first bite, and honestly, good sandwich cookies have a way of doing that to you. Okay, now this one really deserves a standing ovation for the audacity. A round caramel, peanut, and chocolate candy named after baseball legend Reggie Jackson? Talk about a power move. Did it actually improve your batting average? Probably not, but it sure did taste good. Reggie Bars were the prime example of the power of celebrity endorsement. Imagine a giant milk chocolate peanut butter cup filled with a chewy caramel center. That's basically what you got with a Reggie Bar. This became the favorite snack of all young athletes, or wannabe athletes. While the effectiveness of the candy in boosting athletic performance remains questionable, its deliciousness is not up for debate. God, I miss it. The bottle caps were a prized invention of Breaker Confections, who made a huge breakthrough with these sweet bottle cap goodies. These soda-flavored candy tablets came in root beer, cherry, strawberry, orange, and other flavors that were incredibly popular from the 70s towards the early 2000s. These rosy, baby pink tablets were the perfect little snack to chew on in massive proportions. They used to come in green pouches with around 24 candies, though people obviously bought closer to 24 packages at a time to fulfill their cravings. They also had a lot of fame as Halloween candies. So one has to ask, did time eat them? The bottle caps experienced a bit of a downfall when the production got shut down temporarily. This sent bottle cap lovers into a frenzy as the candy disappeared off of shelves for reasons unknown. It was later revealed that another candy company was taking over Breaker Confections, hence the delay in production. Since then, they have made a triumphant return to decks and shelves everywhere. Remember when Chex cereal wasn't just for boring breakfasts? Almond Cluster Chex took everyone's favorite square cereal and coated it in a sweet, sticky glaze with generous chunks of almonds. Who doesn't love a sweet treat? It was basically a party in a bowl, and a far cry from the sad, soggy bowl of milk most of us were forced to eat as kids. Almond Cluster Chex was a game changer for breakfast cereal. The good old Chex squares transformed them into the sweet treat of our dreams, and I couldn't have asked for more. The sticky glaze added a touch of sugary sweetness, while the almond chunks offered a delightful, nutty crunch. It was a breakfast cereal, but tasted more like a dessert. And isn't that what everyone wanted? I'd still go for some Almond Cluster Chex every day if they didn't become folklore. Fruity Pebbles cereal originally used to be called just Pebbles, but natives of the West Coast from the 1970s might remember it from both names, given how much of a hit it was there. These Pebbles were a deeply beloved morning snack and breakfast for many across America. Despite getting introduced in 1969, it raised so much demand across the nation that distribution was upscaled significantly. Fruity Pebbles never got discontinued and became an international hit, but several flavors of this cereal were not as lucky. The company tried to play around with many different flavors, but they eventually got discontinued. You might remember some of these like Dino Pebbles and Bedrock Blizzard, which got discontinued around the 90s. That was not the end of these special flavors, though. The company would occasionally bring them back for fans, leading to several comebacks over the years. French Toast Crunch was another genius innovation by General Mills, and it was this cereal meant to mimic the popular breakfast by having French toast-shaped cereal. They looked like mini slices, but later they gave it a glow-up and it started looking like Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Instead of slices, you now had thin squares, but this was not as successful as the original design, as people particularly did not vibe with the thinner cereal. General Mills launched this in the middle of the 1990s when French toast itself was quite a common breakfast to wake up to for many people, but they discontinued it in 2006 as it was not making enough money to warrant the cost of making it. However, people seemed to disagree pretty heavily with General Mills as petitions popped up, and a lot of fans of the cereal demanded they bring it back. They did reintroduce it in 2014, but the flavor and texture is a lot different from the original box you could find in the 90s. In a way, the authentic French Toast Crunch cereal is lost to time. Remember those magical mornings when breakfast meant a chocolate-covered bar? Carnation breakfast bars were the ultimate cheat code. Packed with grains of dubious nutritional value and a generous dose of sugar, they were basically a candy bar in disguise. But hey, at least they had some milk chocolate, right? These breakfast bars were a marketing marvel. All anyone wanted back in the day was a grab-and-go breakfast bar that kids enjoyed and didn't give parents the trip of feeding them a candy bar as the first meal of their day. Let's face the fact that it wasn't as healthy as its advertisements. The questionable grains likely offered minimal nutritional value, and the sugar content could send a kid's energy levels on a roller coaster ride. That's probably why they faded away into the sunset. Of course, people did not buy them to appreciate the efforts of the PR team, but because they were the perfect thing to take the edge off on a hot summer day. People have been eating popcorn in movie contexts since before our grandfathers were born, so that is really saying something. If you could get a whiff or taste of these like they used to be back then, you would know the hype was pretty understandable. They lasted 25 years up until Planters eventually took them off shelves in 2006, but popular demand would have them returning in 2018 with an entirely new packaging. Not that it was too different from the black cans we used to have, but what was now unfamiliar was the taste. People thought they were getting their beloved cheese balls back, but unfortunately, once you lose a snack, you never get it back the same way. Okay, brace yourselves. We're talking about Heinz kidney soup. Now, I know what you're thinking. Kidney beans? But trust me, this wasn't your average bean soup. It was thick, hearty, and packed with flavor. It was a staple in many households, and I'm honestly surprised it's no longer on the shelves. Kidney beans are a good source of protein and fiber. They're also versatile ingredients that can be used in a variety of dishes. The soup was part of Heinz's effort to offer a variety of options beyond their famous tomato soup. While it may not have been as popular as some of their other offerings, it was appreciated by those who enjoyed its distinctive flavor. It's no longer available, but it remains a notable part of Heinz's soup history. Doodads. This snack mix was a classic party favor, filled with a delightful or terrifying, depending on your taste buds, medley of peanuts, pretzels, and rice and wheat squares. It was like a choose-your-own-adventure for your daily snacking pleasures. Plus, the name alone was just begging to be said in a funny voice. No one's watching, you can say it. Doodads offered a little bit of something for everyone. The salty crunch of pretzels, the creamy texture of peanuts, and the sweetness of the rice and wheat squares created flavors and textures that were both satisfying and unpredictable. Whether you preferred a salty or sweet bite, Doodads had you covered. It was the perfect snack for sharing or hoarding for yourself. No judgment here. If you liked Chex Mix, you would have loved Doodads. They were pretty much the same thing, only better. Planters cheese balls easily remain one of the holy grails of 70s nostalgia snacks. The snack was a fried potato ball that was soft but crunchy, crispy but chewy. It was the perfect snack to munch on while you did any task during your day. If there wasn't any dinner, you'd just ask for a packet of these cheese-flavored balls in a canister. They really are a beloved snack for people who grew up before the 2000s came in with its own catalog of snacks. They did unfortunately get discontinued though. Some people who fondly remember having the cheese balls even remember the exact day the snack got shelved. However, in a nostalgic and dramatic tweet, the original company announced its return in 2018 to just a few stores. But the comeback only got better. Since then, it's back on every shelf in grocery stores just like it used to be. Few can just leave and reclaim their spot like that. Now, who doesn't love a good clam chowder? And this Panera Bread version was absolutely incredible. It was creamy, rich, and packed with clams. It was the perfect comfort food, especially when paired with a crusty piece of bread. Panera Bread clam chowder was a creamy seafood chowder that brought a taste of Panera's bakery cafe experience to the canned soup aisle. This soup was a favorite for those who loved seafood. Clam chowder is a classic New England dish. There were two main types: New England clam chowder, which is creamy, and Manhattan clam chowder, which is tomato-based. Panera Bread's clam chowder was inspired by the classic New England-style chowder, which has been a staple in American cuisine for centuries. One of the most iconic ways to enjoy Panera's clam chowder was in their famous sourdough bread bowl. This one unfortunately fell out of flavor, but Panera Bread's other soups continue to be enjoyed by many. The classic Franco American spaghetti and meatballs. Did you know Franco American spaghetti and meatballs was one of the first canned pasta meals to bring a taste of Italy to busy American families in the 1930s? I'm not sure why they discontinued this, but it's a major loss for the canned soup aisle. This was a childhood staple for so many of us. The sweet tomato sauce, the tender meatballs, and the perfectly cooked spaghetti. It was comfort food perfection in a can. Franco American was known for its ready-to-eat meals, and this particular offering was a favorite among those who wanted a taste of Italian food without the hassle of cooking. While spaghetti and meatballs are often associated with Italian cuisine, the dish actually originated in Naples, Italy. Although it's no longer available, it was a popular choice for families looking for a convenient meal. Don't we all want a square of peanut butter and oats, all covered in rich milk chocolate? PB Max was the ultimate snack of every peanut butter lover's dreams. This powerhouse treat was the perfect blend of peanut butter and oats for a healthy-ish snack. But let's be real, the real draw was definitely the milk chocolate coating. PB Max was the perfect hybrid between the sweet indulgence of a candy bar and the responsible choice of a granola bar. So, if your parents were against Reese's, PB Max was the answer to all your prayers. However, these health claims were a tad bit of a stretch. Let's face it, anything covered in chocolate is more of a treat than a healthy food, isn't it? The trend of everyone wanting astronaut food began back in the 1960s. Space food sticks made this dream come true for all space enthusiasts. Rings a bell? These sticks were marketed as a dense source of nutrients for explorers, or kids who refused to eat vegetables but were basically glorified fruit leather with a sci-fi twist. The big question: did they actually taste like astronaut food? Who knows, I haven't been to space yet, but they were definitely an interesting conversation starter at lunchtime. Space food sticks were the precursor to that whole space-age food fad. They promised a taste of the unknown and profited off the dreams of young space lovers who wanted a taste of the ocean of emptiness. The reality was probably less exciting though, as it was simply a concentrated dose of fruit puree compressed into a stick. But hey, at least they looked cool in your lunchbox, right? And it took pretend play to a whole other level. Now this one might be a mystery to some of you younger Gen Zers, but back in the day, bar none was the OG combo bar. We're talking a layer of crispy cocoa wafers, followed by a creamy chocolate filling, and then topped off with a sprinkle of peanuts. Think of it as a Snickers bar's slightly less famous cousin. Introduced by Hershey's, this bar had it all. Bar none made its way to our snack roaster in the late 1980s, but its reign was short-lived. Unfortunately, it was discontinued in the 1990s, and its fans are still hoping for a comeback. If you're one of the few who were fortunate enough to taste it, I'm sure you get the hype. Well, word on the street says you can find it in some secret stashes at Mexican candy stores, so if you're ever feeling like having a bar none, you know where to go. General Foods had a strong competitor in General Mills with their Squeeze-Its, which were these fruit-flavored drinks that came in bottles you had to squeeze to get the drink out. Yes, the irony of both of their names is not lost on us before you say anything. Still, the branding is pretty brilliant when you think about it. It ties the experience, appearance, and name all together in one neat little package. Of course, people did not buy them to appreciate the efforts of the PR team, but because they were the perfect thing to take the edge off on a hot summer day. It disappeared around 2001, lasting around 26 years since its 1985 debut, and while it had some reintroductions in the market, it could not gain enough momentum to sustain itself. Necco Wafers was a crunchy, colorful candy disc that had a roller coaster of a ride in the snacking world. These crunchy wafers probably have some of the most interesting backstory to them. They were made by a man called Olivier Chase, who made his own wafer maker that helped him make several of these. He created a machine that would cut wafers into pieces automatically. By the 1900s, 3 companies came together to make Necco, where everyone worked even more rigorously on eventually launching their prime product. They enjoyed an incredible time among the shelves of America, quickly becoming a cherished snack amongst the masses. Though just as easy as the wafers snap, Necco's success snapped too. This is when Necco filed for bankruptcy in 2018. With bankruptcy came the doubt of whether the iconic wafers would stay in the market or not. Just 2 years later, a newer company that took over the original would announce the iconic wafers comeback. High-C Ecto Coolers were these drinks you could get, which were specifically Ghostbuster-themed, and were a part of a collaboration effort between High-C and the Ghostbusters promotion campaigns. It worked pretty well since the green-colored drink meant to imitate a stereotypical image of what ectoplasm looks like, which is a liquid supposedly let out by super-powerful ghosts, sold numbers throughout the United States. While being a temporary addition of the High-C cooler drinks, it was both for its flavor and unique design a very appreciated beverage, and most teenagers and young adults would regularly buy packs of the stuff. You could get half a dozen or more for just $1 and some cents, which was a steal. Guess pre-inflation living was something else entirely, right? Starting off with some JellO pudding pops is a great idea. These were some of General Foods' most heavily sold products. They first came out in Louisiana around the 1970s, but they really started taking off after the 80s. People ate these up like they grew on trees. They earned the company around $3 million annually, even into the 1990s. You would think something like that would not get discontinued due to not turning over enough of a profit. But the world works in mysterious ways. Rather, trends do, and they change faster than you can predict. People eventually lost their infatuation with the JellO pudding pops. General Foods tried to reintroduce them in 2004, but they were a bit too different from the original and got left in the history books forever. Hostess CupCakes shares a very similar story to Twinkies, as both were owned by the same brand. They sadly also shared the same ending. With its 2012 bankruptcy fiasco, Hostess Brands had to shelve a lot of its famous and beloved snacks, and these cupcakes were one of them, though they go back a lot more than that. These were the original cupcakes in America, initially offered in 2 flavors for just 5 cents. A pretty cheap way to sweeten up your day. Eventually, they had more flavors, and some of their most popular ones were golden vanilla and strawberry. Tell me, who can honestly resist a good vanilla cupcake? Luckily, Apollo Global managed to bring them back along with Twinkies. In 2013, they would resume selling Hostess cupcakes. Another snack that kids could never let go of in the 90s were these shark bites, which are exactly what they sound like. Gummies shaped like sharks that would come in this teal-blue packet with a massive, friendly-looking shark on them. Now, the design may not have been the most inspiring, but the taste was really innovative. Nobody ever had gummies like these, and most gummies out there did not match the intensity of the flavor or the softness of the bites. Most kids were especially strong fans of the white shark gummies, which tasted amazing. Plus, kids would buy packets of these to find rarer shark bites like the tiger shark. As far as fruity food went, this was hard to beat, and just like the animal it takes after, it reigned as an apex predator. Chips Ahoy is another iconic snack that makes up a pretty massive part of America's diet and has been doing so for the past decades, ever since its debut in 1963. It would not stop just in the USA, though, because Chips Ahoy made its name everywhere: India, Spain, China, Taiwan, Mauritius, the UK, and South Africa. Chips Ahoy was so famous that it became the 3rd best-selling snack in the USA. Everyone enjoyed these wonderful chocolate cookies until one day they had an unfortunate hiccup. In 2005, Chips Ahoy got discontinued due to financial constraints, but it was not a cause of concern as they would be launched back into markets with a newer and improved taste. This time, the packaging even had its own superhero. The Cookie Man was a real charmer. Marathon Bar. This long, braided caramel bar covered in chocolate was a marathon for your taste buds, not your athletic performance. You know it was the kind of bar you shared with your friend, or at least tried to, because it was so darn big. Bonus points if you could eat the whole thing without getting chocolate all over your face. The Marathon Bar was a classic that stood the test of time for over 70 years. Its unique braided caramel center offered a chewy and satisfying texture, while the rich chocolate coating delivered the perfect sweetness. The legendary size of the bar made it perfect for attempting a solo chocolate conquest. Yeah, when your chocolate cravings are at an all-time high on a typical Tuesday night. But you know what they say? All good things come to an end. And so did the Marathon Bar. They just don't make candy bars like the Marathon anymore. Ever had those breadsticks that came with dip? Dunkaroos were a lot like that, except they were chocolate cookies that were accompanied by a frosting dip, which was all kinds of delicious. One of the most popular flavors in the 90s was the vanilla one, but it made a comeback later in the 2000s with the chocolate cookies and frosting flavor. However, it was still discontinued, as nostalgia baiting can only get you so far if you stray from what originally gathered your fan base. Nowadays, they are just a snack that people do not give too much attention to, except those who grew up with it. But back then, if your mom packed this for lunch, you were the kid everyone wanted to sit with. Next up, we have Lentil Soup from Progresso. Now, I know what you're thinking. Lentil soup? Really? But trust me, this wasn't your grandma's lentil soup. Progresso kicked it up a notch with roasted veggies, giving it a smoky, flavorful twist. It was a great way to sneak in some extra protein and fiber. This was one of the healthiest canned meals out there, and its taste spoke for itself. Lentils have been a staple food for centuries, dating back to ancient Egypt and Rome. They're packed with nutrients and are a great source of plant-based protein. Progresso's version took this traditional dish and gave it a modern twist with roasted vegetables. Lentils are still loved in many countries in Asia, but the states have had enough of this protein option. Unfortunately, this particular variety has been discontinued, but it was a great example of how Progresso was always experimenting with new and exciting flavors. This soup might not be for everyone, but it was definitely a dish that had people licking food off their fingers. As we move from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s in terms of our lineup of foods, it would not be fair to start talking about the 2000s without mentioning Altoid Sours. Mars Wrigley first came out with the sour drop candy in the start of the 2000s, which in itself was a decade that defined a lot of what we have today, but this one is a fond memory that only some remember. With an attractive packaging consisting of these super colorful metal tins and an incredibly versatile and quality line of flavors, this candy would always be something you could bet on finding in your friend's bag. Hit versions like tangerine, raspberry, apple, mango, and citrus meant that it had every preference and audience covered. Altoid Sours worked so well because they struck the line between refreshingly sour and fruity in a perfect way. To this day, despite iconic candy's re-release of the sour drops under the name Retro Sours, the original taste is not matched. Now, let's talk about Amy's Tuscan Bean and Rice Soup. Amy's is renowned for its organic and natural products, and this soup was no exception. This was a vegetarian's dream come true. It was creamy, flavorful, and packed with protein. And let's not forget that this soup was organic, so you could feel good about eating it. Tuscan cuisine is known for its simplicity and use of fresh ingredients. Bean soups, like this one, are a classic part of the Tuscan diet. Amy's commitment to using high-quality organic ingredients made this soup a favorite among health-conscious eaters. The Tuscan bean and rice soup was a perfect example of how canned soups could be both delicious and nutritious. It was all the rage for fitness freaks, and they still call for a comeback. Nestle's Quick Chocolate Milk Mix was the savior of mothers all around America. Kids would get up for school sharp at 6 a.m., and while the adults would have their tea or black coffee extra strong, the young would wake themselves up by a glass of hot chocolate milk. Nestle's powder was one of the tastiest and most vibrant ones out there. It really had this comfortable chocolate flavor that was not too overbearing but not too light either. You just had to pour in the milk, the powder, and heat it up for a minute, and you were good to go. A lot of school days and early morning math classes went easier just because this was served up right before them. As of recently, Nestle has discontinued the powder since it is not doing as well as the 20th century era, but an entire generation of kids got their 7 a.m. nutrition thanks to this. If you love peanut butter, you would have loved peanut butter boppers because it was the elite peanut butter snack back in the day. These crunchy granola bars were coated in a thick layer of peanut butter, making them the ultimate finger-licking good snack. They were perfect for dipping in milk, because you know what they say, everything is better dipped in milk. Plus, yelling the name in your best Al Pacino voice was one hell of a party trick. Peanut butter boppers were a convenient and irresistible snack that combined two of the best breakfast snacks you can imagine, peanut butter and granola. They were perfect for on-the-go snacking or as a satisfying after-school treat. And who didn't want to bop on some peanut butter? Unless you know you're allergic to the nutty goodness. All right, let's get a little weird with it. We're talking about Campbell's Mock Turtle Soup. Now, before you wrinkle your nose, hear me out. This wasn't actually made from turtles. It was a Victorian-era concoction made with beef, veal, and sometimes even calf's head. Campbell's Mock Turtle Soup might sound like something out of a fairy tale, but it was a real-life favorite for many. This soup was inspired by the traditional English dish, mock turtle soup, which was created as a more affordable alternative to the expensive turtle soup. The result was a unique, somewhat exotic flavor that set it apart from more common soups. The name mock turtle was just a fancy way of saying it was a fancy soup. Mock turtle soup was a popular dish in the 19th century. It was often served at grand dinners and banquets. Unfortunately, this historical recipe has long been discontinued, but it still holds a special place in the culinary world's history books. Twinkies were America's signature snack. They were the bane of parents in the 1970s. Could you blame them? Kids would chug these down incessantly. At school, at their friend's place, on their way to school. Twinkies were marketed as a golden, spongy, and cakey delight with the most delightful filling ever inside. However, after enjoying an equally sweet reign over America's children, Hostess brands went bankrupt, leading to the discontinuation of the beloved snack. This did not really last too long. Twinkies would return just a year later when Apollo Global purchased Hostess and brought their biggest moneymaker back, to the delight of temporarily distressed children everywhere. Okay, now let's spice things up a bit with this next one. Heinz Cream of Tomato Soup with a kick of chili was a bold twist on the classic tomato soup. Heinz, a brand famous for tomato soup, decided to add a little extra kick to this spicy version. The result was a creamy tomato base with a delightful hint of chili heat, perfect for those who like their tomato soup with a bit of a punch. The history of Heinz tomato soup dates back to 1897 when Heinz first introduced their classic recipe. This spicier variant was a fun, limited-time addition to their lineup, but it seems it didn't stick around for long. Still, it remains a memorable flavor for those who had the chance to try it. Feeling inspired to make some pantry staples? Share your picks in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe for more throwback favorites.